Countering the threat of war in Ukraine, the Holy Father calls on people to pray for peace. We have a report from Rome. Ukrainian Catholics. One priest explains how his parishioners are coping with the tension. Religious leader. The Metropolitan of Ukrainian Catholics in the United States shares his perspective on the brewing crisis. And religious freedom under assault in China. How one U.S. lawmaker is responding. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, January 26, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of Saints Timothy and Titus. I'm Tracy Sable. We begin tonight with some breaking news in the nation's capital. EWTN News Nightly has confirmed that U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer is retiring. The liberal has served more than 2 decades on the nation's highest court. The 83-year-old was the court's biggest defender of the right of legislative majorities to make laws. He also consistently ruled in favor of abortion access. Justice Breyer had served on the court since 1994 when he was appointed by President Bill Clinton. His retirement gives President Joe Biden the chance to nominate his first Supreme Court justice. Former President Donald Trump nominated 3 in his 4 years. And coming up later in the newscast, analysis of the retirement and what is next for the nation's highest court from pro-life advocate Penny Nance. Meantime, the Winter Olympics in Beijing is fast approaching. The Biden administration is not sending a delegation to the Games because of China's human rights abuses. But some Republicans are calling attention to religious persecution taking place against Catholics and other faith groups. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, good evening there, Tracy. You know, for years, several Republicans have been calling for the International Olympic Committee to move the Games out of China. They tell me, quote, that the communist regime is strategically destroying democracy and whitewashing crimes of genocide and religious persecution.
We cannot let anyone forget about what is happening in communist China. NBC must use the Olympics to highlight these atrocities. Sadly, I doubt they will. That's why we're here today, to make sure no one forgets.
Surrounded by human rights groups, Senator Rick Scott says a U.S. Olympic-led boycott over China's human rights abuses would send a forceful message to the communist country. Samuel Chu with Campaign for Hong Kong tells me his own father faced abuse simply because he was a minister. Now, because Chu continues to speak out against the communist regime, he's the first American citizen wanted under Hong Kong's national security law.
If I ever set foot in Hong Kong or in China or in any friendly China country,
You will be arrested.
I will be arrested and probably never get out of jail ever again.
Activists say while much of the outcry is about the unjust treatment of tens of millions of Uyghurs, a Muslim ethnic group, they also tell me China is stepping up its persecution of Catholics and other faith groups.
We have seen so many Christians and Catholics being persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party. They have their churches destroyed by the Chinese Communist Party. We have seen practitioners being arrested and persecuted.
According to a Radio Free Asia report, Chinese Christians, including Catholic priests, are allegedly being detained at secretive brainwashing camps where they are tortured.
They're preemptively rounding up the priests and say, come back to the mainland for a, consultation. Essentially, it's our proverbial, cup of coffee that the government wants to have with you.
Again, it's those talks that have very much Republicans concerned right now. But again, they are calling for the Games to be taken out of the country of China. Tracy?
Well, Eric, switching gears here for a moment, I understand House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced that she's running for another term, which, if elected, would make it her 18th term.
That is correct. She made the announcement, and it's going to be very interesting to see how progressive Democrats take this. As we know, she had to make several concessions with them in order to become House Speaker the last time. So it's going to be interesting if Democrats do lose the House and they become the minority leader on whether or not Nancy Pelosi will, in fact, become minority leader.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Eric. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. Pope Francis is leading prayers today for the situation in Ukraine.
tante omilie sono astratti.
On Sunday, the Holy Father designated today as a day for prayer for peace in Ukraine. Several other countries are taking part. In Rome, the community of Sant'Egidio held a service led by Archbishop Paul Gallagher, the Vatican Secretary for Relations with States. But it was the Pope's remarks that drew the most attention. EWTN News Rome correspondent Colm Flynn joins us now. Colm, great to see you. So what can you tell us about this day of prayer proposed by Pope Francis last Sunday?
Good evening, Tracy. Well, as one analyst put it, if conflict breaks out between Russia and Ukraine, it could be the greatest, largest global conflict since World War II. And here at the Vatican, Pope Francis this morning and on Sunday again asked the world to pray for peace and de-escalation along the Russian-Ukrainian border. The Pope had asked that today, Wednesday, be a day of prayer for Ukraine. He said that these current tensions called into question the security of the whole European continent and reminded global leaders that we are all called to be brothers and sisters. And as he put it, we should never pursue our own goals at the detriment of others. Speaking at the end of his general audience this morning here at the Vatican, the Pope said that he hoped the world's prayers would rise up to heaven and, quote, touch the minds and hearts of world leaders, and that hurts, fears and divisions would be overcome and that common good would prevail.
And Colm, I understand the Apostolic Nuncio to Ukraine gave an interview to Vatican Radio this week. What more can you tell us about that? And what did he say about the situation with Russia?
That's right, Tracy. It was Archbishop Vilvaldas Kulbukas. He was saying that the people of Ukraine were comforted by Pope Francis's words, who he says is one of the most respected religious leaders in Ukraine. And so his statements make headline news and they carry a lot of weight. But he also spoke about the reality of the situation and the terrifying uncertainty for the people there. Since that conflict with Russia started 8 years ago in 2014, when Vladimir Putin invaded the Crimea Peninsula, many people in the eastern regions of Ukraine have been suffering badly, and now they can't face the situation in the country getting any worse. And speaking on Vatican Radio about the Pope's comments, the Archbishop said that knowing you are not alone or forgotten during these difficult times, well, that is a great help.
And Colm, before I let you go, can you give us an update of what's happening at the moment and also how the Kremlin is responding?
Well, Tracy, as you know, tensions continue to rise. Over Christmas, 100,000 Russian troops were positioned around Ukraine, which is the second largest country here in Europe with a population of about 40 million people. But Vladimir Putin denies planning an invasion. Instead, he is pointing towards Western countries, saying that their response to its military buildup is evidence that Russia is the one being threatened aggressively. On Monday, 8,500 U.S. troops were put on high alert, ready for deployment. NATO member states have been boosting their security presence in the region. The U.S. has also sent weapons to Ukraine and over $200 million in defense aid. The European Union plans to send Ukraine €1.2 billion in financial aid. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has urged European allies to have sanctions ready to impose if Russia does invade Ukraine. And meanwhile, as you just heard the bells of the Vatican ring out behind me, Pope Francis today has been asking the world to pray. Tracy?
Okay, thank you so much, Colm. Certainly a concerning situation. Colm Flynn, EWTN Newsroom correspondent. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy.
Back here in the United States, prayers for peace at the Ukrainian Catholic National Shrine of the Holy Family in Washington, D.C. Parishioners have been arriving all day long, asking God to guide Russia and Ukraine away from military conflict. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. First, an update on where things stand. Tonight, the Biden administration says no, an emphatic no, to one of Russia's top demands. And where it all goes next, well, that remains uncertain.
The Biden administration rejects Russia's demands that Ukraine stay out of NATO.
I can't be more clear. NATO's door is open, remains open.
Russia has warned it would quickly take retaliatory measures if the U.S. and its allies don't agree to its security demands.
It remains up to Russia to decide how to respond. we're ready either way.
Meanwhile, at the Ukrainian Catholic National Shrine of the Holy Family in Washington, D.C., in the silence of the sanctuary, under the loving arms of Mother Mary, as the Holy Father in Rome has asked prayers for peace.
We're worried. We're worried, we're anxious.
Reverend Robert Hitchens is the pastoral administrator here. His family is originally from Ukraine. He has friends there, too.
I have brother priests serving with me who have family and friends in Ukraine, and they're extremely worried because they know what could happen.
Alex Mackel, a college student, came here to pray.
We need to just pray to hope that the Russians and Ukrainians are able to let the tensions die down and just have peace and respect each other.
Another student, Margaret Shuriman, also came to church.
He has asked us to pray so that we can participate in the work that he is bringing about in the world and the grace that he is giving it.
Meanwhile, the threat of war looming over Europe, Father Hitchens told me we should never lose hope. He says God is listening and God will speak to us.
We're asking God to impart his grace upon people so that we see that conversion of heart take place, and especially with those who are threatening Ukraine now.
Separately tonight, earlier today here at the White House, President Biden met with CEOs and top business leaders, places like GM, Ford, Microsoft. He's trying to build momentum for his stalled Build Back Better agenda. One of the things the president brought up is that he emphasized families are paying too much in child care right now. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, the Vatican defends the record of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI on fighting clergy abuse. Plus, what the government of South Korea is saying about the coronavirus pandemic. Well, the Vatican defends Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, emphasizing his record of fighting against sex abuse in the church. The Holy See says the Pope Emeritus was the first pope to meet with sexual abuse victims during papal trips. He also issued strong punishments to priests who endangered children. The statement from the Vatican comes after a report claimed Pope Benedict XVI mishandled abuse cases while he was an archbishop. South Korea hits over 13,000 new COVID cases. That is the country's highest number of new daily infections since the start of the pandemic. A health minister urged citizens not to be alarmed by the rise in cases. The surge from the Omicron variant comes as South Korea enacted new COVID measures, including reduced quarantine periods and expanded rapid testing. While more than 100,000 Russian troops are at Ukraine's border, this as the United States and NATO allies warn President Vladimir Putin not to invade. As Owen reported earlier, Pope Francis dedicated today as a day of prayer for peace in Ukraine. And joining me now to discuss is Archbishop Borys Gudziak, Metropolitan Archbishop of Philadelphia for Ukrainian Catholics in the United States. He is also head of the Department of External Church Relations for the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. Your Excellency, welcome. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. I want to get your thoughts, first off, on what we see developing in Ukraine, and also what are you hearing from your parishioners and those in the community?
Well, I come to you from London on my way from Ukraine. I flew out of Philadelphia yesterday, out of Newark, actually. What is happening? Ukraine has a gun to its head, which means not just abstractly a country, but the people under great tension. The war's been going on for 8 years. The country is surrounded on 3 sides by over 100,000 Russian troops. And the saber rattling has been going on throughout, the whole Christmas season. The Nativity narrative is the story of how the Prince of Peace comes to us. And we celebrate God's presence with us, but we also see the anguish of Mary, the bewilderment of Joseph, the exile of the Holy Family. We see Herod, who trembles for his power, and he's willing to kill kids to wipe out the Messiah. the Lord is with us where we suffer. And the question of Ukrainians is how much more do we need to suffer? There's been 8 years of war, the devastation of the infrastructure, the economy has been undermined, there's cyber attacks, and everybody is praying for peace. And we were very grateful to Pope Francis for this day of prayer, global day of prayer for peace in Ukraine. Members of our church, with the solidarity of many others, had prayer vigils today across the world. And we hope that the Lord can speak to the heart of the modern Herod, that he does not take more blood on his hands. It's a life and death situation. But Ukrainians aren't falling apart. They're hardened by a difficult history in the 20th century when 15 million Ukrainians were killed by the world wars and Nazi and Soviet totalitarianism. And they today are getting ready, getting set. There's 400,000 veterans of this war, plus the 100,000 Ukrainian troops that are in uniform, and they will fight for their dignity and freedom, because right now that is the issue. It's the question of dignity, freedom, democracy, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, the opportunity to have a civil society. That's what Ukraine has, and Putin is threatened by that, because if that comes into Russia, the kleptocratic oligarchy will fall apart.
Your Excellency, we have probably less than a minute left or so, but quickly wondering, what are your hopes with this situation, and how do you think it'll play out?
It's hard to say what will happen. My hopes is that there will be peace, that the international community will be in complete solidarity with a victim. Ukraine has never attacked Russia. It has no intention of attacking Russia. It's got a Jewish president. It's got a Muslim population in Crimea, which is fervently, passionately patriotic towards Ukraine, even though it's annexed in Russia. It's a place where people are moving from the totalitarian past to a future of freedom. And I hope that movement is not stopped. But that is exactly what President Putin wants to do. I hope he doesn't do it by escalating the war.
Well, Your Excellency, unfortunately, we don't have any time left. I wish we had more time to talk, but thank you so much for speaking with us about this very difficult situation, and we are all praying for peace right now.
Thank you for carrying the story, and please continue because there's much more to come.
Up next, Pope Francis has advice for parents who are critical of their children. Plus, a pro-life group says it is calculated how many people attended last week's March for Life. Pope Francis has a message for parents who tend to be critical of their children.
Il sogno simboleggia la vita spirituale di ciascuno di noi.
At his weekly talk to pilgrims at the Vatican, Pope Francis says when parents are tempted to criticize their children, they should ask for help from St. Joseph, because the Father of Christ on earth can lead us to God, who provides light, strength, and peace. While conservative leaders around the nation have signed a letter calling for Education Secretary Miguel Cardona to resign. This comes after a Freedom of Information Act request revealed the Education Secretary had asked the National School Boards Association to produce a letter that compared concerned parents to domestic terrorists. And joining me now to discuss this and more is Penny Nance, CEO and President of Concerned Women for America. Penny, welcome back. Great to see you again. We have a lot to get to today, but first, I want to get your thoughts on Justice Stephen Breyer's retirement from the Supreme Court.
Well, this wasn't unexpected, and he's been under a lot of pressure from the left to retire. And, I think that's actually kind of sad, but we were expecting it not quite so soon. And we're just in waiting mode. We're waiting to see what the president does next. We have said that this is an opportunity for the president to follow through on his promise to create unity in the country. He should appoint a constitutionalist justice, a judge. And so we've got a long process to get through. We'll see what happens. But it's going to be a battle, I believe.
Yeah, I want to go back to that letter I mentioned before. There were a lot of signatures on that letter, including yours. Can you talk to us about why you think Secretary Cardona should resign? And also, has there been any reaction to the letter?
Well, not directly from the secretary, but let me just tell you, parents around the country are disgusted by what they've seen from the Biden administration and certainly from the Department of Education. They were in cahoots with the National School Board Association, accusing parents of being terrorists. And what's worse, and we're discovering every day a little bit more of this story, they were weaponizing DOJ to watch them and to treat them like terrorists. So it is very disturbing what's happened. Senator Tim Scott, a great man from South Carolina, has pulled together a letter from, I think it's 23 senators who are looking into this as well. There is a lot of concern as parents are discovering this sort of attitude within the Biden administration that once they drop their kids off at the schoolhouse door, they become property of the state. Christian parents do not believe that. God gave us the responsibility to raise our children, to bring them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, to teach them our values, our principles, our faith, and anything that the school does beyond reading, writing, and arithmetic to go around us to get to our children is wrong. And so parents are standing up all over this country. But we are discovering that the Department of Education, the Biden administration, has been utterly wrong in this and has been treating parents as terrorists.
Yeah, and Penny, I want to kind of further that. Speaking of education, on his first day in office, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin actually signed an executive order allowing parents to decide if their children will wear a mask at school. Now, it took effect on Monday, but not without controversy. Apparently, 7 school boards are now suing the state over it. And we're also hearing that children who didn't wear masks at some schools were separated from other students and actually put in auditoriums. I want to get your thoughts on all of that.
People have lost their minds. It is outrageous what we've seen from the unions, the teachers' unions, the way that they, at the beginning of the pandemic, I guess decided that they were not essential workers. They relegated children to Zoom calls. Our children in America have fallen so far behind in their education. You have entire swaths of children in struggling neighborhoods that without a miracle and with some real intense effort will never catch up. And it's the very kids that they pretend or purport to actually care the most about. It's not true. Parents are working very hard to care for their children. Parents are in the best position to judge what their children need. And so simply, Governor Youngkin said, parents should make the decision. And unfortunately, and I live actually, in Northern Virginia, some of these large, very leftist school boards have said, no, we actually want the president to tell us what to do. We don't want parents to decide. And so this is going to work its way through the courts. But this is very important. We're setting the standard for the entire country, really, on parental rights. I truly believe that this is the opportunity for this nation to move forward on parental choice in education. I want every mom and dad in America to have the same option that I had to put my children in Christian school. The dollars should follow the kids, not the other way around.
Well, Penny, we're running out of time, but just want to get your final thoughts on all of this and how can we as parents, move this forward for our children?
Well, the first thing is be aware. And I think, what happened during the pandemic woke up a whole bunch of parents of the nonsense that their kids are being taught, everything from, transgender ideology to critical race theory to, just this false victimization and narrative for children and, just sort of the shaming of kids. I believe that parents have woken up. The next thing is, what do we do about it? Well, I think that your viewers need to consider running for school boards. They need to actually be involved. They need to go to the school board meetings. They need to make sure their voices are heard. And then they need to make sure that their congressmen and their senators understand that, and their governors, that school choice in education, parental choice in education, it's an idea whose time has come, so that every parent in America that isn't satisfied with their local school system has another option, another opportunity, and the money that's being spent by the state and by the federal government follows that kid to the school that the parent chooses.
Well, Penny, we're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much for your time. Always great to be with you.
Thank you. God bless you.
Well, finally tonight, the 49th annual March for Life went ahead as planned last week, despite the frigid temperatures and coronavirus restrictions in the nation's capital. And one group says that it has determined how many people took part. Well, according to analysis by the Pro-Life Students for Life of America, around 150,000 people attended the march. The group determined that number after studying their own time-lapse video footage. Students for Life says the total shows, quote, the sacrifice and unshakable fervor of this generation and this moment. Indeed. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.